The three amigos. How wonderful. And guests. So, for those that don't know me, apologies for my rather random and eclectic approach this morning. I'm feeling very humorous and jovial, so I'll hopefully bring some of that energy to the call today. And it might be because I'm joined by you all, and in particular with Elana and Melissa. I've had the privilege of knowing and working and collaborating with Melissa on a number of different projects over the years. Uh, One I still remember where her team sent a picture of us sitting inside the boardroom table of Fonterra at Princess Street, running a virtual delivery of a coach training program for China and multiple participants. And they'd put pictures of like fish and stuff swimming around the outside of where we were. It was absolutely hilarious, with two tech people supporting the interaction between the different systems. It was quite surreal, and the world has moved on quite a bit since those days of virtual delivery, and since that point I've kept in contact, and we've got really amazing insights and opportunity to talk about the latest greatest in both technology and what it means for us as humans, as leaders, as practitioners in the space that we work in. Melissa has spoken on all sorts of topics, from the future of technology to kindness as a specific focus for us back in the day, because she just is tech with heart. That combination is the power that she brings to these conversations. And one of our lead facilitators, only more recently known to me, but feel like it's been a lifetime friend and kind of connected soul blob cosmically, is Elana. She's a lead facilitator, a new co-host today, but a thought leader, practitioner, and experienced leader in her own right in organizations prior to setting up on her own, and then joining us at the Adeption team, bringing deep wisdom in terms of really how you can support organizations, individuals, and teams to develop and grow using both development goals, but systems and complex dynamics. That's a made-up conversation. I'll probably say she does Scrabble in her spare time as well. But Elana, why don't you introduce yourself and get rid of the myth or myth bust, what I just shared, and say hi to the team, and then we'll get into it with Melissa.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Mark. I was actually listening thinking, who is that person that you're describing? Great to be with you all. Mark and I recently met. I've had the privilege of joining the Adeption team only recently, and what an incredible experience already. I can see Jamie here, the GM in Australia. So great to be with you, my friend. Melissa and I have connected very briefly around our affinity for innovation, technology, and human behavior. And I think I'm really excited for today's conversation that we're all going to have together about what's going on now and where can we navigate to next. Thanks, Mark.
Beautiful. And Melissa, yeah, I've given the very high level kind of billboard of your awesomeness, but why don't you just share with the wider group some of your experience and your expertise and deep wealth of knowledge, both practically and academically, that you're drawing on, that's going to really inform the session today.
Oh, big question. Yeah, so I suppose my passions really lie across a couple of things. So I'm really passionate about future technologies. I have two technology degrees that kind of support both at the beginning of my career and near I went to the end of my career. That sounds like it's over, but more recent. So kind of bookmarked there, two technology degrees. And also in between that, a really big passion for people psychology, people behaviors. I spent my time across different industries. So I can see a few people on the call from Air New Zealand, from Fonterra, BNZ, ASB, Countdown Group, Warehouse Group, et cetera, et cetera. So switching industries, but really I really liked the big companies that had different cultures and behaviors. And, Air New Zealand's a great example. The culture of engineering, very different to finance team, cabin crew, et cetera, et cetera. And then also with global parts of the business, I think it's really interesting culture-wise. So ran some big projects, launched some things globally, but really felt this kind of pull of future technology coming again with, robots are going to take over our jobs, AI is going to take over our jobs, and really wanted to be in that mix of that. So kind of wanted to combine that kind of passion for people that I had and that passion for technology. Hence the kind of tech with heart, which was kind of a brave move, because heart's not really a word you see in a business title very often. But it was kind of my point to, doing work with that kindness element and really thinking about the humanity of things. So yeah, help tech companies think about the people element, the unintended consequence, thinking about the design and the behavioral shifts that that will cause. And then on the people front, I help them think about the latest psychology, neuroscience, people trends, as well as technology and how that's going to impact. So yeah, get to do some really cool things and work with really cool people, because the other piece I do is around foresight and kind of strategic futures. And so, yeah, companies and people I work with tend to be quite growth mindset and, preparing for the future, which I think is super exciting.
Beautiful. And I know you love to be able to engage audiences as you go through, not only in what you share, but also the interaction that we have. So, like, heads up for everyone that's tuning in, listening in, all you really need is your good self, pen and paper. If you don't want to unmute and share questions, feel free to save them up and pop them in the chat, and we'll just be balancing time with questions and where we can go. And of course, we'll invite people, if they're happy, to unmute later on, just to Q&A as we go. With that in mind, Melissa, I know that you've been talking to a number of groups about that intersection of tech with heart and what it might mean for people and leaders. And you've also, not that long ago, come back from the US from one of the largest conferences, the People Development Conference that was over there. What are some of the key themes that you're picking up in terms of interest areas, challenges, opportunities of technology from those different settings and different talks? Because we've got that US combined with the more New Zealand centric more recently in talks this week. So just keen to hear what's bubbling to the surface, what's front of mind for people, just to start us off kind of high level, and then we can dive into the detail as we go.
Yeah, well, there's probably two lenses to that. There's what I see a lot of people talking about, and there's the things that I'm thinking about, which are often two different things. But if we start with the People Conference in Chicago, 26,000 people, largest people in the conference in the world. So yeah, exciting to be there. From my perspective, it wasn't as forward thinking as I would have liked, because that's the space that I play. But in the people tech space, it was really interesting starting to see the real impact of people teams not understanding the AI that is in their technologies. So AI has been in HR technologies for a long time. It's been in your recruitment systems, your ATS systems. It's been in your learning systems, your LMS systems, and kind of been flying under the radar a bit. But now extra pieces of AI are kind of coming into a lot of the HR technologies. But it's become very clear that HR teams have kind of put it in, and it's been a bit of a set and forget. So they haven't necessarily been keeping an eye on how the decisions are being made, how the algorithms are making those decisions, any shifts in their data sets that it's starting to sway any bias or those kind of things. So when I talk to HR teams and we're kind of going through their technologies, they really don't know what factors are decided in their technologies. They really don't know. They certainly don't keep an eye on them, and they also don't test them or, regularly check them to see if there's been any shifts. And I also encourage them to actually use AI itself to ask it, what are we not noticing here? How has the algorithm shifted? What are we making decisions on that we might not really, really digging into the decision-making factor of those technologies. And there's been a couple of big court cases with some HR technologies where there's a bit of a fight between, is it the technology company or is it the company that's put it in? And the technology companies, of course, who've got megabucks behind them, are saying, no, it's up to the company to really be keeping an eye on that. We enable them with the technology, but they should be choosing how they maintain and use it, which really talks to me about HR people leaning into understanding a little bit more about how AI is operating in their own systems.
Yeah, and even some of the conversations you were referencing around kind of scenario mapping for HR teams, and going, in the scenario where you've got, well, I won't steal your thunder, what are some of the scenarios, and what are you noticing are the responses from HR teams around embracing or not the future possibilities of AI, etc.?
Yeah, I think that largely, both in the US, when I was at that conference and also, the clients that I'm interacting with, they are still a little bit in the kind of learning phase, just sort of dipping their toes in the water. And I also notice a kind of a movement to their natural stance of what's in our contracts, what's the legislation say about that, and not necessarily leaning into the human factor element of decisions. So, for example, I run a 2-day program, and on the second day, we go through, after we've learned all the technologies and how it impacts, we then do some scenarios. And there's one scenario, I sort of almost don't want to give it away, but it's one scenario that always just blows my mind, where I talk to them about, that they've discovered that there are a large number of people in their organization who have really figured out how to leverage AI to the maximum, and they are now loving it. They're doing their work in 25% of the time, but they're not necessarily returning that extra time to the organization. A couple of them have got side hustles and they're earning extra money and loving it. Some of them are going surfing because that's their passion and getting more exercise in. Some of them are spending time with their elderly parents, etc. And but their KPIs, the customer feedback on everybody that they're engaging with is either at the same level as it was or higher. How do you feel about that? And we sort of drill into these different scenario components. And every single time they're like, well, their contract says 40 hours a week. And, if then, so basically they jump into, we will have a disciplinary with them, or we will jump into performance management with them, or, oh, well, if they've got that much time up their sleeve, great, we'll give them this extra work. Or, oh, well, if they can do it in that quicker time, we will cut their contracts and give them 20-hour contracts instead of 40 hours. And so that sort of saddens me, because that's not thinking with foresight. That's not thinking ahead. And it's also, to me, not thinking team human. And then I love it when I can then show them some communications that I've seen within their organization and say, let me show you a couple of things that you guys have said lately. Work smarter, not harder. And then another one, it's not about the output, not about hours worked, it's about output. Okay, well, basically they've absolutely been doing what you've told them. Also, what is the psychological safety of your organization that most people will not feel comfortable to say, hey, guess what? I figured out how to do my work in 25% of the time, because they actually know exactly how you're going to react. And also, depending on how that organization has treated them over the last couple of years, whether they will choose to return that extra time and insight to the company or not. If you've been burning them out, if you used to have 10 people in the department and now there's only 3 and they've been picking up the extra workload, they see it as payback. They see it as brilliant. Okay, they haven't given me the skills. I've actually built the AI skills myself, because the company is still in the scared phase and haven't upskilled me. I've found their skills, I've applied it, I'm going to take the benefits. And I think there's a really interesting shift dynamic in organizations that they are really not thinking about, which is that the power of AI is now in the hands of the individual. It's not in the hands of a corporate. So previously you would put in different systems and the company would gain the benefits of that. Now the individuals are figuring out how to smart the system. And there's also becoming a very quick divide between the people that figure out how to use this and leverage this, and the people that haven't quite got on the bus yet. So I think, yeah, companies have a lot of things to think about in this space. And I really implore people to be thinking about this, because if you do any of those reactions and those people leave the company, and then you hire somebody that takes 40 hours to do that work, have you won?
Melissa, I am all of those things. I'm watching around the room at the moment with many like nodding heads and resonance around what you're describing. I think what I'm really hearing to kind of spotlight 2 key areas that I probably want to illuminate here are real structural change. For example, this traditional notion of an employee contract, right? We're in a conversation about AI, and yet the conversation here and the strategic risk almost for an organization is, how are we reimagining the shift from power over via contract and I own you, into how might we reimagine what an employee contract looks like, to bring equity and perhaps even like unleash some of this capability, which is, we want people being able to really effectively use AI. So it kind of starts to speak to how are we reimagining our people contracts that perhaps are starting to show signs of being outdated. So that's kind of one signal that's showing up for me. And I think the other one that you spoke to quite earlier, which was the skills gap. And I think traditionally we look at implementing a system, and we're still going, and I'm generalizing, but I'm wondering if we are heading towards implementing systems the same way that we've always done, and the missing consideration is, how might we bring in skill sets into that discovery and design phase of a project to understand and take ownership of the skill gap in us, the people selecting that software criteria. What does that need to look like? Because it will actually begin to transform culture, psychological safety. What does output versus outcome, like all of that starts to show up, that we perhaps should be now beginning to turn our attention to. I'm wondering, sorry, they're just two insights that I'm like really hearing are structural changes. And I heard you say we're not as the conference you went to, it's not as forward thinking as you're anticipating. And look, I acknowledge that you sit out there and play in this often. And for us here in the everyday, perhaps in varying stages of the journey, where should we be starting to think more forwardly? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, well, yes, it's a little bit similar to that scenario that I talked about, in that I really wish people teams would be thinking about these things now, so that when they hit these situations, they don't hit with a gut reaction of get down to the transactional HR stuff, that they've already thought this stuff through and they've thought through about how to optimize it. I see three massive things. I see that kind of preparation of it's not just the people team, it's the exec teams and, really senior leadership to start to look at how do we want to receive this? Are we saying we're an innovative company, and then on the other hand, we're sort of trying to shut things down? So have you got some tensions between actually what you're saying and what's kind of happening in your organization? So to have that kind of plan of, actually, we do want it to be psychologically safe for people to tell us these great innovations, and we do want it to be psychologically safe for people to share these skills with others, because that's going to have great positive ramifications for the organization. But I think the other two is around behaviors and capabilities. So capabilities is massive. So we talked about a divide between those learning AI and not. But also the thing that really strikes me is, I don't think people have realized that AI has just doubled. If you start to use AI, it has doubled your capability toolkit. So, for example, those that know me on the call, I'm a really creative person with ideas. I've always got these kind of crazy plans and ideas, and I'm very creative that way, but I can't draw to save myself. I am so grateful for Designer and PowerPoint that makes my PowerPoint slides look pretty, but now I can be very creative, because literally by describing it, which I clearly have a vision. Often I'll work with someone and I'll say, this is my vision, and they'll make it happen. And now I can use AI for that. So I can do creative things. I could do, movies and stuff if I wanted to. There's all sorts of a creative element that is now opened up to me that I might have gone to someone who had a creative edge. Likewise, there are loads of tools for data analytics and creating dashboards and graphs and things like that. So before, you might have gone to a business analyst because, oh, hey, can you do the pivot table and the VLOOKUP and the 7-layered formulas for me? And then now it's like, I can just talk to it and I can get it to do, make me a graph on this, create a pivot table, filter it on this, put this in it, use the data from this, also collate it with that. Okay, now dump it into a PowerPoint. Like your capabilities have doubled. And so I think that that's kind of underestimated in an organization, what capabilities one employee would now be able to do, and to potentially stretch into other areas that might not have been their standard job title and, you know, what was in their job description. So capabilities, yes, it could separate it could divide if you aren't upskilling, but if you are upskilling, you could actually be doubling everybody's capabilities, which is a really interesting thing for organizations to be thinking about. Well, what is the impact of that? What does that mean? And then on the behavioral side of things, with every technology that comes in, there are behavioral shifts that happen around it. And your IT department and even your change management plans often don't think about the behavioral elements. So a couple of basic ones. If I now know that, this 100-page report I used to create for the exec team or the boards, if I know it's now going to be run through an AI filter and they're going to nugget it into 6 bullet points for themselves, how might that change the way I would write a report if I know that's how they're going to consume it? And so how might that start to change the behavior of how we write things? Lots of technology tools are really going to start looking at us in all sorts of different ways for our tone, our relationship building, all of that sort of data, a lot more than it has before. How might that change the way I write things or the medium I might use in the future? A really cool example came up from a psychology session that I was at earlier this week around, a company put in some AI tools in their contact center. And basically what it did is it made efficiency gains of like 15% or something. So the company was thrilled. And what it did was after the call center contact call, it would summarize the call that the person had and put it into the system and put key points and all that sort of stuff that the person used to have to do. And so AI, boom, sorted out that, made a whole lot of efficiency gains. However, that was a really important psychological break for a person to reflect on the call, think about what had gone well, what it didn't, what they'd talked about, what were the key things, and have a bit of brain downtime to do that. Once they stripped that out, the impact of burnout on the call center was horrific because they were going call without that flow. And so that's one of those human behavioral elements that's not talked about when people are putting technologies in. I'm begging people to get involved with your Copilot implementations because it's largely a technology project, and the people departments get involved purely for what's the training rollout for this, or what's the comms about this. Whereas actually there's going to be some massive behavioral shifts that are going to come with Copilot. So yeah, team human behavioral, the capability bit I think is really interesting, and people in organizations thinking about what is your strategy around embracing this. Am I a leader that starts my team meetings and goes, right, what have you guys found? What are you guys using AI for this week? I found this thing and I've used this and it saved me lots of time. What have you guys got? And sharing it and encouraging it, and fantastic, that's amazing. Let's all use that. Or are you I hope you didn't use AI to create that report for me. Where are you? And what's the messaging coming across your organization?
Wow, so much richness there. I saw Jamie had his hand up. Pause for a second, Jamie, and I'll tag you in just a second. So bizarrely, I've got a simple brain. I'm just trying to get my head around and create a little bit of a metaphor for some of what you've shared, Melissa. There's an exercise that we use sometimes with workshops where we have a group of people paired up opposite each other. It's called the magic floating stick exercise. The aim of the group is to get the stick to the floor, but what bizarrely happens is the stick ends up lifting towards the roof because it's a complex adaptive problem. And as soon as one human sees an interaction somewhere else or notices something's happening, they tweak it and it evolves. And we've got multiple interlooping adaptive systems. As you said, how are they going to interpret the report I write? Because they're going to put it through a synthesizing AI. So I'm going to write the report different. And so if I write it in bullets, then it synthesizes to 2 points. And then you've got this issue of development being lost. The idea of humans need to move through the crawling phase in order to build the muscle posture, etc. For standing. You can't go from laying to standing. If you miss that developmental stage, it causes an issue. You've got the same thing going on here around critical thinking. If I don't get the chance to reflect or do critical thinking, then I miss some of the synapses firing and the neuroscience that's behind that, that's going to help me to evolve, and therefore I'm in some ways potentially going to dumb down, and that's going to accelerate versus the augmentation potential of technology. I mean, there's so many spin-offs, ramifications, and potential scenarios that we can't even get our head around because as you think about it, you're evolving the thinking, right? So, hey, I don't know if that evolves and loops back to you, Jamie, if there's a question in that or you need to loop back. But Jamie, did you want to dive in? If not, I'll tag Melissa again.
Yeah, look, just I guess what I'm is really resonating with me, and I can see it coming through the comments, and Melissa, what you're saying is this cultural aspect that it's a technology topic, but we tend to focus on the technology, but the real thing is the culture. I spent quite a number of years, I know other people in this group have as well, in areas like TQM, Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen, so all around, and it's one of the biggest grapples we've had in business for decades now is around productivity, right? How do we drive productivity? When I worked in that area, we were having very similar conversations about what are we doing with the productivity gains? And when I think about AI, it's not that different in a sense. It's about we're creating productivity gains in a perhaps more accelerated way and a little bit more democratized. It's even more so in the hands of the individual. And so, your options are, when you create that productivity gain, do you bank it by therefore removing cost, or do you reinvest it? And it's very much around the mindset that you bring is more important than the skills in Six Sigma or AI, as the case may be here. So my question is, are we adequately drawing from and learning from the lessons of the past when we've been focusing on productivity already for so many years? It's just coming in a new form with AI. So are we seeing it as a new problem when in fact perhaps it's not?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely not hearing conversations where people are learning from the past. And it's interesting you use the word productivity a lot. And that's what I'm hearing from companies begging that they need more productivity while their employees are saying that they're burnt out. And then you've also got AI that would really help with a lot of those things. But it makes me think of an example that I use a lot with to kind of explain technologies that we've been through before, so learning from the past, and the behavioral element that we often miss. So, I've had not all of you have got your pictures on, but I've scanned through. I think most of you will understand what I'm talking about when I talk about the dial phone with the cord that you're connected to the wall. There were certain behaviors and capabilities that went with that we have underestimated, and we have not really carried through to understand what that transition has created. So, back in the day, I'll just walk you back to your teenage years, or younger than that actually, where you had one phone in your house. Your privacy was as far as you could stretch that cord around the door. Your parents knew your friends. They answered the phone, and your friends had to put their best, most polite voice on to get put through to you. Likewise, you learnt how to take a good phone message for your parents. I'm afraid Dad's not here right now. Who must ask calling? Yep. And what's your phone number? And what time will you be home for him to return your call? Because remember, in those days, you had to be at the phone to receive the return call. And so you learnt all these, and then if you won, your dad would say to you, called so-and-so back and they said you were very polite on the phone, and you're like, yes, it's the, there was a whole lot of etiquette and behaviors that kind of went with that. And as we've moved, and now if I cut us kind of drastically forward, 70% of our, and in that time, we also were learning stuff around communication, and there was all of these courses on body language, and it was about 58% your body language and your movements was how people understood how to communicate with you. And then 38 was around your tone and the pace that you spoke, and only a 7% was around what you actually had to say, right? But then you cut to present time, up to 70% of our communication is digital. 70%. So we've had a massive leap, and there's been a whole lot of impacts that have come with that now there's some really interesting conversations I'm having with organizations, and I'm going, well, yeah, how that's happened because of, and I have to kind of take this path back. So, call centers. Oh, we have got some problems with our young new starters. They don't really have phone skills. They don't really know how to talk on the phone, and it's really weird. And I'm like, well, it's not really weird, because we grow up with this. We have a foundation of base capability that you are expecting them to have that they don't have. And they're like, oh, I've never really thought of it that way. Yeah, you've never thought of it that way. So that's the kind of human behavioral shift and capabilities. With every new technology that comes in, there's a behavioral impact and a roll on. And so what I'm trying to get people to lean in now is to think about the technologies you're putting in and start thinking now, what are the potential behavioral kind of impacts that could come around it, rather than getting to, decades down the track and going, oh yeah, of course. Okay, that's why. And that's why most teenagers will go, what the hell have you called me? Like, you're invading my personal space. This is so uncomfortable. I feel really a lot of anxiety around this, like, and then, then layer that into the workplace where you've got a leader that's like, can't we just, this back and forth is annoying. Let's just jump on the phone and sort this out. So they call the young person who's horrified, thinks their boss is invading their space, and it's not that either are right or wrong. It's just different digital technologies that we've grown up with, different skill sets, different behaviors that come with that. So we have to your point, Jamie, we've been through these sorts of transitions before, and I think on a lot of those we've like I'm doing sessions with companies now on digital psychology and what's the digital body language that you leave through your communication platforms, and they're like, oh, like, geez, we haven't thought about this. And so there's upgrades we've missed. Let's try and plan for the next forward thinking things without having to have that awkward, messy stage where we make mistakes and those unintended consequences.
Beautiful. And I'm mindful, Patrick, you've got your hand up. I'm just going to take this forward for a little while and see where we go, just because I'm mindful of covering up a few key milestones on the conversation. You've talked a little bit about the concept of digital psychology and what's the footprint you leave. I'm almost tapping into that crystal ball, the futurist thinking. What are some of the other technologies? So we're going to go wider for a little longer before we start narrowing down and going, so what? Aspects of the metaverse, other things that you're keeping an eye on that we also need to consider outside of just the AI part. Where else do we need to bring our focus? How else do we need to be scenario planning and starting to think about it now?
Yeah. Biggest one in the people space, one of the biggest ones I would be thinking about would be robotics. The reason for that is that if you follow, so I follow all the future techs, and a lot of people in the robotics space are calling 2024 year of the robotics. So while everybody's like, oh, over here, heads down, focused on AI, I'm watching these shifts and developments happening in the robotics space, and it's massive. And so, shoot to the future. I won't put a date on it because it'll scare you, but, your employee wants to, BYOD takes on a different side things when they want to bring their personal robot to work. What are your what are your feelings on that? And or before they manage to do that, they're working from home and they're outsourcing some stuff to their robot to do. But yeah, robotics, the reason I think that's interesting is because AI is accelerating the development in that. So you know, particularly in the language, cognitive kind of conversational element. So before it was very kind of movement, you had robotics in a lot of your warehousing factories, etc. And, you know, military and health and safety angles. But now you've got it coming in with that mobility mixture as well as the conversational, and now being able to not just, because people are like, oh, robots are trained on one task. Yeah, but what if they now can do multiple? And what if robots can now learn, which they can? So rather than you having to code something, it literally watches you do something, and then it's like, you know, so, you know, soon I'll be like, get my robot to watch me make my cup of tea at 10:30. This is how I like it perfectly. Boom, sees me do it once, now knows how to make me a cup of tea, you know. So that's a very interesting impact on a workforce, particularly when you start to go, oh, it's not just my warehouses. What could that mean for other elements? And, you know, some industries are really excited about that, you know, some of the hospitality that really struggle to get people into those roles. You know, this is quite an exciting space for them. But yeah, robotics. Also, I think that the AR, VR space, I think is really interesting for people to be thinking about, because that is going to start to integrate much more. So I always talk about, you know, the current VR masks, which are quite invasive, quite heavy. That's not going to be the future. So yeah, you could write off that becoming the future right now. But you know, my bet, if I was designing something, I would have like a little sort of diamante thing or something stuck on the side of your head that not ingrained into your brain, don't worry, that just pops over. So it'll be like a little screen, because, you know, glasses and things might not be suitable for everybody. Just pop across, and that'll augment things into your life. So I'm walking through the company, I pass somebody, I can't remember their name. Great, my AR tells me their name. So, oh, hey, John, how's it going? It makes it much less awkward than it was before. Somebody with what's the word I'm after?
Diversity.
Yeah, neurodiversity, thank you. Neurodiversity issues, it would layer extra things to help support them. I'm working in a health and safety environment. It gives me my top tips of things to be careful with when I'm using this piece of equipment. You know, I can bring different things up, you know, recall things, bring my lists up, you know. I think that's going to completely change the shape of work, and that's not that far away as we would think. The technologies are all kind of there. It's just putting it together, and it's making it more accessible for people. So again, it's about planning and thinking ahead for those things, because that would change all sorts of things. Your learning and development, your even your leadership training. You know, someone with really bad EQ, and you know, it reminds you that it's somebody's birthday the next day, or you know, those little kind of human element tips. But the way that that's going to be integrated, and it could be like, you know, people had a lot of technology at home themselves before the company necessarily made it wide. And I think you're going to have a really interesting kind of movement of people getting access to those technologies, and looking at how to integrate that into their workplace, and what they would track, and the data that it would capture, and how that could be utilized in positive and negative ways in a corporate is also, you know, again, opening a can of worms there.
Yeah, Melissa, amazing insight. I'm now like building the notion of your insights of, here's what we're seeing with AI, here's what we're seeing with VR, here's what we're seeing with robotics. And I know Mark mentioned that you've just come from the States. You've also, I think, recently graduated as a futurist as well with Jane McGonigal. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but check out Jane McGonigal's YouTube clip, which is scarily, I think she did that. I was looking this morning back in like 2010. And the name of the YouTube clip is How Games Can Make a Better World. So it's just really interesting threads and connection, right, that we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry, can I just interrupt what I think? I actually
Yeah.
have Nikki Bebbington, who's on the call. I have you to thank for introducing me to Jane McGonigal in the first place. Nikki showed me that I think we tried to get her as a speaker at one of our conferences a long time ago. Now we wouldn't have a chance in hell, but yeah, Nikki showed me that clip, and I was just, and again, that kind of kindness element and around using technology for good just really struck with me. So yeah, I did my certification with the Institute for the Future at the beginning of the year. And yeah, just came back from Houston doing a second one because yeah, I'm a bit like that, bit of overkill, at Houston University. So yeah, all focused on the future.
Awesome, amazing. I know I've done a little bit of work with Rachel Botsman, who looks at trust interwoven with technology. So that's another great thought leader if you want to, not so much a futurist like Melissa, but connects like a lot of what does trust and reputation look like in a digital world. I'm really curious to hear you talking across all of these different realms, AI, robotics, the VR space. That is a lot, I think, as a people person. We, I think, have a tendency to dip into how do I quickly get across all of this to know? And that can sometimes trip us up. We quickly try and become the experts before we dive in, and that time to zero, I'm not quite sure the maths works out for us to become the futurist in order to know how to navigate. So as our futurist in-house with us today, you know, to make, and I hate this saying because you cannot make complex simple, I really want to, I guess, ask of you, where are just some really good pebbles that are worthwhile paying attention to, and actions around, don't, you know, for example, don't try and get across the technology. This is where you make smart decisions to partner, or, you know, I would love to hear from you around where should we be paying attention?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would personally like to retire and just be learning. Like there is so much stuff to learn, and I'm constantly like on webinars at the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And yes, I'm scanning all technologies, all people psychology stuff, future of work, HR tech, that kind of stuff. But you don't have, that's what my world, that's what I do. So I would start with what your world is. So if you focus on L&D, I would look at the technologies in your L&D space. If you looking at leadership, I would look at what the technology is evolving in the leadership space. There's some really cool stuff happening there. So I would focus it to your area of interest, but I would also encourage you, and I think I wrote an article for HR and said about this last year, I really think IT and HR need to become besties. So I would encourage you to get closer to that and earlier in on those conversations, because they're often, you know, kind of focused off on a tangent about what they're putting in. And I just love you guys to get involved in that conversation, start to think about the unintended consequences, the behaviors. So even if you're just in there listening and hearing about the technology, maybe make a friend in there who's good at explaining things in plain English to you, so you can get the interpreted, or record it and run AI over it and say, explain this to me as if I'm a 10-year-old. But yeah, use those different tools, but I would say focus on your area of interest, because that's going to make it easier. And then it will kind of expand from there. But there's so much information out there in different learning styles, whatever kind of suits you. But yeah, take that step, because I keep begging in the sessions that I'm talking about. I really need people to be digging into the behavioral elements, because a lot of the tech stuff is, thanks for putting the article up. A lot of the tech stuff is designed by very black and white structural thinkers, and so we need some diversity of thought in these conversations. And you know, that's why, you know, in my world, I've got 2 tech degrees, so I'm sitting in there and I'm like, look, I love tech, I'm all for tech, I'm excited about tech, but let me also add this element to it. You know, there's you know, a humanness around it. So I'm not in one camp or the other. I'm really about both, and I think the future is about how to optimize the best of both. And for an individual to focus on what is their current industry, or their current kind of job channel, or their current area of interest, and look at the technologies in that space, because it'll make it more interesting for you too, because it's something that's appealing. Don't start researching metaverses or IoT devices and those other things if they have no interest to you and aren't related to your particular space.
Yeah, amazing. Great suggestions. I'm really keen now to perhaps open up, either throw up your hand or drop a question in the chat, and Patrick, your hand must be like so tired from staying up there. So thank you so
Look what's
much.
happened.
Thanks so much for bearing with us. Conscious, I would love to get the chance to hear from a few people, but Patrick, please, I'd love to hear your insights.
Sure. Just one comment. In the recent past, I've been working with a number of people who are really clearly AI experts. They've been at it for 20 plus years. And I remember a conversation with one of them who, I'm trying to be discreet, was responsible for or was involved in an early, I'll say, significant experiment that went sideways. And so one of the things, and now he's working for another company because of his expertise, and one of the things that he has really cautioned me about is how is the safety issue with artificial intelligence and how people really need to have a plan and to be way more cautious, that the possibilities for what it can do are way bigger and the possibilities for how it can go sideways are way bigger. So that's just the one piece. And all I can say is, that's what I'm hearing from the experts. I don't know enough about it myself, but you can take the comments from these two guys in this case to the bank. So I just want to, bring people's attention to that. It's a different magnitude of change. So I just think we have to, and it's, it's some kind of algorithmic change. It's not incremental. That's all.
Beautifully positive. I love that you brought our attention there. Melissa, any reflections on that?
Yeah, there's a great quote by Ray Kurzweil, who speaks about singularity and kind of the future, etc. And he says that we're going to see as much change in the next decade as we saw in the last century. So I think to that point, it's the acceleration of change is something that we haven't quite seen before.
Wowzers. And it helps me think a little bit about us mere mortals trying to ground all this off. And I can feel a bit of disturbance in my tummy as I think about incredible possibilities of what the future can hold and the exponential combination. If Uber came out of combining two techs and you're looking at these 15 and you just do the maths on the probability of putting those together, we're in the millions and billions and they're evolving constantly. It creates a bit of a freak out, to be honest. And I'm hearing that a lot from people. So how do you ground yourself with all of that? You seem to keep your foot in the now whilst thinking about the future. You're all about meeting people where they are, human beings having contact, random acts of kindness and being with people to do it. Yeah, how do you manage this this combobulation that might occur as we try and handle those two realities?
Yeah, I mean, kind of leveraging off that the last point that was made, I see this as the chance for humanness to really step up. Like the tech stuff is going to be accelerating. I'm all for actually, how can we accelerate some of the humanness, bringing out the best of us? So I guess that kind of keeps me grounded in that I'm kind of thinking about the human factor of the stuff. So not getting too swept away with, so whenever I'm looking at all these different technologies and seeing the kind of connections between things, kind of bringing it down to, well, what will that mean for us and how can we evolve? And always trying to look at the good side and the bad side to kind of balance that out. But I'd also say that by thinking ahead, it stretches you a little bit. And it means you'll be a little less surprised when things happen. So actually, I think that it's a really good skill set for resilience. We talk about kind of for growth mindset and resilience. If you're always pushing yourself to think out a little bit, even if you then kind of come back, it just means that as things flow out, you'll be, oh yeah, I had heard about that a few years ago, or oh yeah, it's not quite as unexpected. And so I think that's why I'm really passionate about getting people to think out there, because it just helps you brace for the moment a little bit better. So, but yeah, how to leverage the awesomeness of what we have today and just making those baby steps that are kind of comfortable for you. Yeah, I actually the program that I did in Houston with Houston University really got me to think about the responsibility of, where sometimes I really am taking people out. And in fact, depending on the company I work for, I have to make a decision how far I think they're comfortable to go out. Because sometimes people are like, yeah, let's think out to, 2050. And, their current practices and their current mindsets really not ready for a 2050 shift. So, kind of thinking that. But yeah, Houston University, there was a thing where they were talking about the responsibility of that, because for some people it can be, you talked about the feeling in your stomach, Mark. For some people, depending on what their knowledge is in this space, it can be really uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I've actually now, because of that, started building into my presentations grounding at the end of it to kind of get them back to, but we're in 2024. This is a reality of where you are now. You know that some of these things might be coming, so that's great. You're going to be less surprised. But what can you do tomorrow to move yourself to a bit of a better understanding? But yeah, let's bring it back. You're safe. There's no robots in your house. Unless you got a vacuum cleaner, you're good. Let's ground to this, and how we step forward.
What about the fridge robots? They're going to get right, back to you, Elana, and then I'll round.
Once my fridge gets completely automated like that, I will be a size 8. So it's probably bring that on. It'll give me some harsh reminders when that sort of stuff gets automated.
Yeah, I may be showing my age recalling the cleaner on the Jetsons right now, but we'll just leave that off to the side. Amanda, I would love to invite you to jump on.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Melissa, this has been amazing, actually, and I'm still sort of smiling about the phone call example, remembering put the phone down, Mum, I'm on there. You mentioned bringing in the human element, and I'm probably going to feel a little bit controversial, but I can't help myself. I actually think that's lacking in a lot of HR teams. And so I guess there's 2 parts to my thought/question. How do we actually begin to bring our internal customers into our thinking and our experience design? And is that a gap you've also seen and experienced with your kind of background? And therefore, is it an opportunity to not just collaborate with IT, but our customer experience people, our product designers, those sorts of things? Because I think about the company I'm with, we talk to our customers all the time. We use the insights to design new technologies, new ways of working, and I feel like that's really lacking in a lot of HR teams.
Yeah, I'm still in love with that phrase, moments that matter.
Yeah, same.
And how to weave those kind of experience, because I think the future will be about personalization and about experiential. That's going to be absolutely heightened. And so less of the transactional focus, more on those. And so you're exactly right. You've got some great stuff, mixture of teams in your organization who could help with that. And sadly, you're right. I have a real love and affinity with the HR space. But, when I talk to them about what's the latest psychology trends, or what's the latest people things you're putting in, or what's the latest, they're not looking at those things. They're not bringing those in, which is just what I'm trying to bring in. And, and I keep saying in my scenarios and stuff that I work through with them, you have a legal department who will be looking at the legislation. You have a finance department who will be thinking about the cost. You have this. There is one people department. And, I'd really love them to be thinking about the people stuff, and, people always talk about them not having a seat at the table, or, not being appreciated. I'm like, really leverage this stuff, because this is stuff that's going to be powerful to the future, is thinking about the human aspects, not just the, workplace implications, but the kind of the wider human impacts that are going to happen from this. And if we just sit back and let things happen, I just think we're really missing an opportunity to, this is people's opportunity to really lean in here and show the strength of what it can mean to focus on that part. So yeah, I think we've got a massive role to play in this kind of digital transition that's coming.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, sorry, who just popped there? Sorry, did I interrupt someone? Kesh, was that you? Who was that just jumped in? My apologies. Please come back on.
They may have been saying my reception is about to go.
No worries.
You are make your other comment, Elana, then I'll just do a round off, just mindful of time. 5 minutes left.
No worries at all, Mark. Melissa, I just hear by no coincidence, like so much heart in that. And Amanda, thank you. Thank you for bringing that different perspective to the conversation. There is this, for us, a developmental gap, and I'm just here for me what I'm taking away today. And I'm conscious of the lens that I bring around, my background and my expertise here. And I really see this place that we're grappling with, and it speaks to the upgrading the humans, which is there isn't enough time to become the expert to work out what the best plan is, because this is complexity. So if you've done any complexity work, this is us we are living in a world that is emergent, and it requires a different way of being. We don't have time like COVID to go back to the boardroom, come up with a really great technology plan that takes us 4 months to create. And by the time we come back and walk out the door, it's changing at such a rapid rate. It's how do we become more comfortable with uncertainty and start adopting those complexity practices, which is how do we step forward next? And how do we invite in more experts to the conversation? A traditional people conversation would have had the expert as the people person. Who else now needs to come to the conversation so we can kind of make collective intelligent steps together? That's kind of a really key for me there. I'm not sure, Melissa, if that resonates for you, or that's just been a big insight in the conversation today that you've really illuminated for me.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was slightly distracted. I was looking at the chats, and I'm really struck by Ian's comment about should holograms hug or shake hands? And I'm saying yes. Ian. I can't wait for the haptic technology where I'll be able to hug my friends remotely, as well as in person. But yeah, team human all the way.
Having experienced your in-person human hug bombs, I'm scared at what you can do with those holographics around the world. You could pop up from anywhere and provide a hug to people in need. It's brilliant. I'm mindful that we're unbelievably 3 minutes from the end. I knew this would be an amazing high-speed bullet train roller coaster of awesomeness. Just want to thank Elana, and thank everyone for their contribution to making this such a rich and engaging conversation. To help us with ongoing steps and where to next, I've just popped some detail.
Mark, you're on mute.
Bizarrely, you click enter when you're on Zoom and it puts you automatically on mute, or maybe it was just recognizing words I was going to use are going to be rude, who knows, before I did. So I'm just putting some resources and some next steps into the Zoom chat. We're going to be putting some additions. We always do a follow-up note, including the recording. There'll be some additional thinking from Melissa, from Elana, from Jamie, who knows, even from myself, if I have a brain fart that's even useful sharing for that piece. And there's also a really great link into the next session. So we're talking here the world of technology. We're also going to take a little bit of look back with an exceptional leader that I've worked with for many years in different guises, Kim Ballinger, who leads Assure Quality. Kim is bringing in the concept of the thinking around, well, how do we develop as leaders in this context? Like, what's informed her past? How has she supported herself, evolving herself as a leader within Fonterra, outside of Fonterra, in her own life and since? And what does it mean for the future? She thinks ahead and starts considering how do leaders need to develop into the future? How does technology support that? What else might be coming into her thinking? She's a deep thinker, a compassionate leader, and a servant leader who's operated on the global stage and is exceptional to share her insights. So if you're not already registered for global chats, click in, it's free. It'll connect you in on a regular basis. We'll provide a follow-up. We're at 10:59, so I will round off with just another huge acknowledgement, Melissa, for time, effort, energy that you've brought to this session. Really insightful, really powerful, and really valued. Thank you for joining me, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Amazing. Please come off mute and say thanks. Connect. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Kia ora, thanks everyone. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Have fun with your robots. See you later.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to stop record now if anyone wants to stay on and say hi.